pain in the butt, but planting a garden is, I mean, there's many steps, and we have to take each step individually, one at a time. And this step is arguably one of the most fraught after, most confusing, and especially really unrewarding steps you can take. That wasn't convoluted enough for you. I mean, what we're referring to is crop rotation. It's everything. It's something that you have to do, but you don't want to do. And when you do it, you don't really see any changes. I mean, we rotate crops every year, and honestly, nothing changes. Tell you what does change: when you don't rotate and it gets jacked up, you learn. And it's happened to me many times until I finally got it down. And even still, we fight with it. But you know, I bring this to you now because it's so important. And again, the garden's fresh in your mind. It's probably even still planted. So welcome back to Sandy Bottom Homestead. I am in coastal North Carolina, and what I want to do today is I'm gonna walk you through how I'm gonna rotate my crops. But you have to remember, I'm a 4-season gardener. Well, 3.5-ish season gardener. So we're rotating from all seasons from the year. So what we'll do is we'll walk through and I'll show you what I plan to do. And this is really important because this is the point in which you may make or break your garden. All right. So let's do this. We're gonna start in spring, okay? And I'm gonna point to the beds and I'm gonna tell you what was planted where. You could probably, or you can go back and fact check me. I'm going off of memory here. There's a high possibility that I'm gonna be wrong, but I'm gonna double check. But even still, this is how we're gonna rotate from what it was in spring, right? So what we have now in spring and fall, for the most part, except for this giant behemoth here, is the same crops minus a couple. But what we had is on this trellis, but not here, over here, which is a separate bed, we had snow peas, and then, if I'm not mistaken, cabbages in the back bed, broccolis and lettuce in the front, kale, cabbage, and I believe more spinach was in this bed. And then we come back, we'll start back here in the back. So in the, not the back, but right here in this bed, oh boy, I'm gonna have to take it, I don't know. It may come back to me, but in this bed we had potatoes, and then garlic and onions were in this bed. Sounds right. So that bed back there, this is the problem. I can't really rightly remember. Now that I'm thinking about it, I believe that it sat empty. So that means I'm letting this bed sit empty, and I shouldn't. That's okay. So that's part of it. And then in this bed here, we had broccoli. So we had 100% broccoli in here. Most of these beds were monocropped. And then we come into summer, the summer season. See, now I'm getting jacked up again. And oh, this bed was Brussels sprouts. What am I saying? It was Brussels sprouts because they grew from winter through fall, winter, and even into spring. So this was the Brussels sprouts. There you go. Man, I knew I was forgetting something. So in the summer season, what we had, this is a little bit easier. Seminole pumpkins, and then in the back we had tomatoes, and then in the front here we had corn, and then here we had sweet potatoes, and then here we had popcorn, and then we had a cover crop here which was potatoes that went into buckwheat, and then the next bed in the back we had squashes, and then in the bed in the very back we had peppers. Okay, so that being, now that we have that all out in the air, and that was a mind racker. Going into fall, so we're still in 2024, right? So going into fall, we've got broccoli, cabbage and broccoli, kale, collards, bok choy, lettuce, turnips, radishes, supposed to be spinach, but Brussels sprouts, and then a couple rutabagas, mostly empty bed, and then cabbages in the back. So what we can see here is, and I don't know, I try to do it this way. This is what I try to do, but it doesn't always work out, is I try to move beds forward one into a clockwise rotation. The issue is this year we added these 2 beds, and then what's going to end up happening is we're going to add the 4 beds from over there over here. So it's just it gets jacked up at first. The beauty of it is when you add a bed, you kind of got a little bit of free play going on. You got a little bit of free play, so you don't have to add, you don't have to rotate necessarily. For instance, like in this bed, I had kale in the back row and I have it again. I can get away with that this year because I know that once I rotate out of this bed, I won't be back in here for a number of years into that bed. So it's not really the end of the world, but and some stuff you can get away with not rotating. But we need to factor this in, and we need to take a step back and look at it and say, well, what really worked for me? Because there's a couple things that did not work out well in my garden this year. One thing that actually works really well for this is our potatoes, because they have this weird growth time. We put them in February, they grew, and then we harvest them at the end of May, early June, and then it's really kind of an awkward time to plant, because what ends up happening is we have the rest of our beds planted and we don't really need anything else, which is why the cover crop went in really good there. So we're going to continue that back and forth between potatoes and buckwheat. That's what we're going to do. Now, here we had onions, and it was another really weird time. I don't know if I really want to grow onions again this year. And you know, this does factor into the plan, because when we rotate our crops, we usually plant our onions and garlic together, right? So our onions and garlic go in. They don't really come out until June either, but here's the problem. It's just like with the other one. Now we've got 2 beds, and I was able to put popcorn in, which I'm not going to grow that again, but it wasn't really, the juice wasn't worth the squeeze. So I don't know if I want to do onions again, because quite frankly, for me to be worth it monetarily to grow, I need to have enough harvest to kind of make up the difference for what we would buy, but then we harvest so many that we don't eat them, and some of them rotted. And then the bed sits empty. You know, I would rather have 2 squash beds or another tomato bed or something like that in there. So that's, you know, we're planning to leave onions out this year and not even worry about it. Now, as far as the rotation and like what happens when you don't rotate, this bed right here is a great example. I don't know if you remember, but there was a trellis on the back. So last year we had beans on there and they got mosaic virus and they died. This year we put cucumbers on there and they got mosaic virus and died. Here's the deal. We knew we had an issue in that garden bed. We knew that there was a mosaic virus. I failed, and I didn't look it up and say, I need to plant on this trellis what is susceptible to the mosaic virus. Because even though it wasn't the same crop, and we technically did rotate, but we knew there was a problem there, and the stuff was definitely was affected by it, and we didn't take the steps to protect our plants from it. Meaning we didn't plant there, or we planted there, so it's kind of an issue that we need to take into account. So it's not just blindly rotating crops around. It's also, if you know you have a problem and you can figure out what that problem is, mostly what we're talking about is diseases here. Crop rotation will help with pests, but it's not that big a deal. You know what I mean? It doesn't do that much. But when you have a known disease, you don't want to put something there that's susceptible to the disease, because you're just going to infect it. And we didn't get any cucumbers this year. We started off great too. Next year will be different. So what I do, I remove the trellis completely, so I'm not even tempted to put anything on there. I have my garden planted like this now. right? I have everything planted here, and this is why when this bed failed, and I mean, we do have 1, 2, I need to weed this bed, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, probably like 8 rutabagas that we'll get out of here. That's great. We'll get those rutabagas. I'm not, you know, it's not a full bed. This bed is not really being used. And when we start this year, like our spring garden is going to be laid out completely different than this. We're not going to put broccoli here. We're not going to put broccoli or cabbage here. We will still have our, we should, if everything goes right, which it should do, we will have our kale and collards and mustards there. But other than that, the bok choy and the lettuce won't be there. These will probably be here, knowing how I grow, how it goes with me growing Brussels sprouts, they will probably be here. But then you have this bed, which has turnips and radishes in it. And hopefully soon I'll get off my butt and put some spinach seeds in. Then that will be different too, except for the spinach might be there. We also won't have our cabbages here in the back bed. And then even the greenhouse, we're really careful about rotating the greenhouse. So the greenhouse, we've got our taters over here, and then we've got lettuces and bok choys over here. So if these make it and they're still, or the same plants still be here, but chances are they won't be. So we're gonna rotate them out completely. The only reason why these kales are here is because they're the same plants from last winter. So really what we're doing is we're rotating for every single season, and no season consecutively has the same plants in the same bed. Now, let's say, and so the one way that I was able to minimize the confusion for me is, as you've seen, I've got a bed of Brussels sprouts. I've got a bed of cabbage. So like, I don't have to worry about rotating individual plants. I have to worry about rotating cabbage. Not like over here on this far bed where I've got lettuce, bok choy, mustard, kale, and collards. Those 5 plants are going to need to be rotated. It can get really confusing. If I land on a combination that I like how it grows together, for instance, if my collards and my kale and my mustards and everything goes well and plays together, and I'm happy with the amount of production I'm getting out of it. So meaning I get enough kale out of these 3 plants for my family. I get enough collards from these 2 collard plants. These 7, 8 mustard greens, I get enough out of those. These will get enough out of, truth be told, we probably need a little bit more, but we're good for now. We will take these and keep these groupings together each year. So this could very well be like, this bed would be here next year, next fall. Because even though, and if for some reason the kale, the collards, and the mustard all are still alive in the spring, then we would put something, I would probably go ahead and I'd probably put a row of cabbages right here. And then for the fall, we know that this grouping would work well. You may be wondering, why are you not doing it again in the spring? Well, first of all, I don't really need to replant those 3 plants. I'm tired of saying those 3 plants, so I hope you know what I'm talking about. I don't need to replant those every spring because they're still kicking. Truth be told, by the time they start to wear out, if they even do, we're done eating them and they're gonna bolt soon. So that's a benefit that we have. Now the other ones, we will grow those somewhere else. And so if we know that we're gonna move this bed here next fall, then we can put those combination of lettuces and bok choys, we can put it in the back there in that, trying to get in that bed next to the greenhouse. And then that will, because it would be years until we rotate if we move one at a time. So it would be at minimum 2, 3, 4 years before we get back there. And you know, we can do things like that. Now for everything else, I don't grow Brussels sprouts again in the spring. They're a one-time deal. Again, these will probably be around, there'll probably be 1 or 2 left in the spring. So what we'll do is we'll just take these and then move them forward. And so, and then so we're going to get more beds again. So we'll move those forward. Now I'm going to have 2 3x6 beds up front. All of my beds are 4x8. And when I get those 2 3x6 beds, they will not be in the rotation. There will be specific plantings that we will use to our advantage. So what I would really focus on is I would focus in the planting season for your garden. If you don't want to do whole beds of a certain crop, like a whole tomato bed or Brussels sprouts or cabbages or whatever, think about what you've grown together in beds and think about, has the quantity been enough? Have they grown well together? And then the other thing is, are they making it through and are you getting harvest from them? So think about groupings and consider keeping those groupings together as you move them around your garden. People garden for the way the garden looks, and I'll say this, even though we're going to keep those together, the whole garden itself will change each season and it'll look different. This garden bed will look different here, as that will look different over there, so on and so forth. This is a crucial step into doing your garden plan. So plan it out, look at what you're doing, look at what you've done, and then make a decision for the future, and then just be ready, because once you get that rotation going on, you're going to be on point. Okay, so the goal is don't leave crops in the same beds for multiple seasons, and I like to do it per 365 days. So each season rotates, and then you just keep it moving around the circle. Nice and organized and methodical, and it's just rinse and repeat.